Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. And today I'm reviewing Illiterati, which I have this instead of a box, and I don't have the fancy stick that keeps this open, so that's Illiterati, or this is Illiterati. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly, but this is the cooperative real-time word game of trying to keep the world literate, as it were. And the basic idea of the game is you're going to have a variety of different difficulty levels in the experience. By the way, prototype, this is over on Kickstarter, link down below. All things, rules, components, stuff like that, subject to change, and all of, well, that. But this is a cooperative real-time word game which you and other players will be working together, or you could play it solo as well, in order to construct words meeting certain criteria, accomplishing a certain number of books before heading into the final endgame challenge. I'm going to go through a brief rules overview covering the general sequences of play. You can also check out Before You Play. They have a fantastic rules overview that will likely be a lot better than this, but in case you want to dive into it. So each player is going to start the game with a red book. So you're going to have your own red book which gives you specific terminology or things you have to go for. In this case, this player over here needs to construct 8 letters worth of words. It could be a single 8-letter word, it could be a 5-letter word and a 3-letter word. You could also go over. You can have an 8 and you can have a 6-letter word and a 4-letter word, but 8 total letters worth of words that hit money and finance. This player over here needs to accomplish 8 letters worth of words that have holidays and events. So that's basically what's going on as far as the player's specific criteria going on in the game, although these things will change because you have to accomplish a variable number of books. For the sake of this example, I'm going to be doing normal mode, which means we're going to be drawing 7 letters around. We have a library limit of 3, that's this over here, and then we have burned letters allowed is 3. So in other words, over here on this track, we can get a total of 3 burnt letters before we lose the game, and then we're trying to accomplish 2 books per player. So that's the primary objective of what's going on, and then clearing the library for final chapter. Again, these are just some rules to keep the game balanced at various difficulty levels. From there, you're going to go ahead and draw 7 letters for each player of the round, because again, 7 letters in a non-solo mode. So we're going to add a bunch of letters to this player over here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're going to add 7 letters to the player over here as well. So again, both adding 7, and this is all being done with a timer, by the way. For the sake of this, I'm going to kind of skip that detail, and hopefully I counted out the right amount there. It looks like I went 1 over, and we're going to start the time over here. A 3-minute timer, and we're trying to form our letters. Now, I'm only going to go through the general idea of how this plays. I'm not going to heavily really do this over here, but money and finance terms. Now, this is a cooperative game, which means working together. It means talking to others. It means asking them, can I have that E over there? And if you notice over here, this player has a whole lot of consonants over here and needs a few more vowels. They got 3 vowels, but with 2 W's in the mix, it's going to be kind of hard to make everything work. This player, a little less so. But offhand, I see that we have, I don't see a Y over here. Money would be great as far as, well, money and finance terms. We have borrower. What would be a money and finance term? This is the problem with real-time games and the stress of trying to figure things out. We have holidays and events, which is a whole different aspect. I mean, birthday, I'm not seeing the Y's. We could have, anniversary. These are hard things to go for. Let's find a singular money or finance term that we can work with. Money wouldn't work. Loan, can we do loan? Can we get something? Some progress? Nope, no loan over here. We could do interest. Nope. It's gonna be hard to actually make this work in terms of me actually getting this done properly. But the good news is, let's show you what happens when you can't get things done, because you want to try to go for the specific terminology. That's how you finish your books. But the main thing you're being mindful of is that the timer is slowly ticking down, and if you don't correctly build a bunch of words, whether or not they hit your criteria, then you're going to start burning letters and eventually, well, lose the game. So your first criteria is to kind of outlast things. Start constructing words and worry about making them into the correct terminology later as you go through things. So we have work over here. We don't have a K. We're just going to grow. Here we go. I'm going to borrow that G over there. We have grow. Okay, great. We got that. We have delay. Delayed. We have a DLA. We don't have a Y, so we can't do delay. We could do this is the problem with word games, trying to make it all work. We got a 2 over here. That's great. Really great letters over there, Alex. We got load. L-O. Nope. We got Koi. We could do koi. That's a terrible ratio. You need 3 letters, by the way, per word in general. We could use the letters from the library. That's a common pool, although that library limit's going to get lower and lower as you start messing with different things over here. We have a tux. I'm going to call that a word over there. We have Dose. A dose is probably a word. It's not probably a word. It is a word. We have our dose over here. We have a whole bunch of E's over here, which means we could do just as a real. Real's a word. We're good over there. We got me as a word, but you have to have a minimum of a certain number of letters, which is more than that. We got seems bad. They're going to have a problem here because we only have 3 letters in the library. Now, also for what it's worth, I'm doing this myself. I'd have another player over here doing this. I just set up for 2 players. I need more than this. I need more help over here. We have mo, we have real, we have or. We can do or over here and take those out over here because then we could do leam, meal and leam are not words over there. We could do growl, that gives us a little bit of flexibility. Feel like we should be able to do more. We have sod, a sod, no, I don't want to get rid of I'm trying to get, the ratio here is not great. Jeem, meej, teaks, meat. We could do meat, and then we have this over here, like so. Still have a problem, Dose, sod, jeeks, we're having a problem here. To, newt, wet, wote, twode, growl, eel. There we go. Eel, boom, okay? Timer ran out a second ago. I'm already done. Okay, but this is basically what's going on over here. Ooh, or. I can use or as a finance term. Let's go ahead and give this to this player over here before the timer runs out, and let's go ahead and show you what's going on here. So, I made a bunch of things work. I did it all. We're not going to die this round, because the goal is at the end of the round, you check to see if all your letters are correct. Koi, to, or, grow, eel, meat, and dose. Those all seem like real words. I can check them up if I'm sure. Jux are my 3 library letters. These don't have to form a word at all. And then I'm trying to see if I hit my goal. Assuming I didn't burn a letter, let's say I had an extra letter over here, let's say it didn't work out, then what we're going to do over here is we're going to flip over the library letters, we're going to burn a letter, and that's effectively a wound as far as you're concerned. That's one round where you didn't meet your things, you go straight to the villain phase, you cannot accomplish any books. Alternatively, if we didn't have that, which over here we didn't, we go ahead and we look over here and we see if we accomplished our terms. We have meet and dose. A meet is arguably an event. I could call a meet an event, and by the way, this has to be 8 letters and has to have 3 red letters over there, so that's another thing you want to be mindful of. So arguably I can call a meet an event, maybe not, doesn't really matter because I don't have 8 total letters. A dose is certainly not an event, I mean, unless you call getting, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like an event over there. Then we have money on finance terms. I can use that or, that seems pretty solid. I arguably could use grow as well. The problem is I need 2. Let's see, if we swap these over here, I'd have my 3 purples, but I would need at least 1 more thing. Do I want to call 2 a finance term? It seems like I'm pushing it as far as just using numbers. But like, you know, your money grows if you have interest in the bank, or is like arguably a finance term. I'm just thinking too much Catan and stuff like that. But the point is, you have to try to fit your criteria. Once players meet their criteria, that's going to be one of the books they have to get for the various skill level. And then from there, they're going to take a blue book, which are often a little different, a little bit harder as far as their approach. This one has anagrams. You have to have 2 words that are at least 4 letters that are anagrams using the same letters. So for instance, care and race. So you want to try to get words, you're going to have to get 2 sets of duplicate letters forming 2 words that are similar but different as far as what you're doing there. And the blue books will give you those little challenges there. If one player hits their 2 books done, and or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on the skill level you're going for, if one player hits their level over there, they're going to stop getting more books, and they can just help the other players as you start moving into the final challenge. So again, just a quick rinse and repeat. During the course of the round, you're going to be drawing new letters, you're going to be combining them to try to form words. Your main criteria is not having abandoned words left alone, abandoned letters left alone, but your criteria to a certain extent is also hitting your book so you can move on to the next phase, because otherwise you're just delaying things. And the bad part is that's not it, because when you're done with the round, whether or not you achieved words, whether or not you burnt letters, you're going to go ahead and have the villain phase, where you're going to draw a villain card, and the villain's going to attack the words you just built. Whoever has the most colored letters, meaning not these black ones here, must discard 1 letter from each of the words. If there's a tie, choose which player will discard. This player has 6 colored letters, this one has a whole bunch more than that, so they're going to have to discard a letter from each of their words. And this is the bad part. You see, if this player had to discard a letter from each of their words, they can go ahead and discard this M over here. This one slides in, they still have met, they're good to go. You can hold on to any letter, any word that is formed after it being attacked, you can be totally fine. This player over here, every single time they discard a letter from one of the words, they're going to be left with a 2 word, which means they're going to have to discard their things. They can arguably get rid of the G over here and still have row, but the rest of their words are going back in the bag as they discard letters from their words, basically leaving them a little bit vulnerable to what's going on, and you can start to see the downside of having smaller words. Villains will come in a variety of different attempts in terms of the various things they'll do. Anyone who has a 3-letter word must discard 2 letters from any of their words. We have this one over here. Would you like a lolly? Each player discards 2 letters. letters, or one player must discard a word with at least 5 letters. And one of the things the game has is a sense of escalation that as you draw repeat villains, as I draw, let's say, this one over here, if I draw this villain right on top of this one, you're going to stack them on top of each other and do all their effects. So the game's getting harder and harder because the more villain cards that come out, the more likely you are to start hitting villains that are already on the table, having more waves of attacks coming at you, forcing you to discard your letters and forcing you to constantly reset as you try to accomplish your books. You're going to rinse and repeat this process of going through a round of grabbing new letters, forming wards, seeing if you have to burn a letter, having the villain attack your letters, moving into the next round as you try to accomplish your books. You have to accomplish 2, 3, or 4 books depending on the difficulty level, at which point you move into the final challenge. You're going to select a book color. Let's say we're going to do red over here. You go ahead and look at it, and then all players will have to come up with whatever this final chapter challenge is. In this case, you have to have 12 words, 12 letters worth of words, whatever you want to call it, but again, just 12 letters. It could be 1 word, it could be 3 words, whatever it is, with emotions and feelings. How about frustrated? Frustrated is a good one right about now. But that's effectively what you're doing in Illiterati. Forming words together, working together, helping each other. One player accomplishes the word, the rest of them help and start doing their own thing, or work together, try to reconfigure, talking about how you can do this. What if I move that R from the end of your word? I can help build a word. What would count as of money and finance terms? One of the nice things is it's a cooperative experience, which means you don't have to worry about disagreements or whatnot, because you either all agree or you don't. You're all ultimately on the same team. And with that, let's kind of move into review and covering all the thoughts and opinions and all that stuff. Starting off with ease of play, this is a really easy game to learn. It's a handful of pages, like 5 or 6 pages, fairly easy to go through, not a lot going on. Technicalities are the biggest thing you're going to run into, but it's basically what I said, just drawing letters, using them to form words, and a few rules about what you need to know as you go through the experience. As far as player count, it's a 1 to 5 player game. I've only played this one at 2 and 3 players so far. I have not tried the solo mode. I can't talk about that. I feel it would be a different enough experience that I just don't know how to play. 2 and 3 work great, and I imagine 4, 5, whatever, I think it would all work fine. The nice part is more players don't add more time to the game because of this timer over here. You're basically locked into 3 minutes per round no matter what you do, and it's just a little more chaos, for better or for worse. You know, more heads, too many cooks in the kitchen, I don't really know, but 2 and 3 worked well, and I'd happily play it at more. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, overall, this is a word game that doesn't have a lot of the problems I have with word games. In general, I like word games as a concept, but I find in practice they have a few issues with them. One of them is the fact that often the smartest player in the room is the person who, not the smartest, the most well-versed, most literate, most knowledgeable of words. To a certain extent, it almost feels like they have a heads up against other players, which arguably is true of any genre, but it feels like that gap is more present in word games. Then combine that with the fact that often spending more time coming up with the perfect word can get you more points, and I find that it doesn't really encourage the type of game I'm looking for, even if it is fun and challenging in its own right. So I always like the concept of word games more than word games. And this doesn't have those problems at all. This has the fact that you're working together means the smartest player in the room is on your team, although it does have a downside. We'll come back to that. It also has a timer, which means there is no taking forever to come up with the perfect word. You either make it or you don't. So you have that real-time element, that fast-paced phoneticness, and the 3 minutes is a good enough number. It's not so long that it's, just doesn't feel like the timer's there at all, and it's also not so short that you feel that pressured. I could strongly hear the argument for a 4-minute timer as well, and honestly, I'd encourage either the creators themselves or just you, if you buy this game, to have, a 4-minute timer, maybe a 2.5-minute timer. And one of the things you could definitely do to add to your own personal difficulty scaling, making it easier or harder, less or more pressure, is just modifying the timer in the game. Again, I happen to think that 3 minutes is a great number and works well for the game, but for the cost of an extra sand timer, you'll have a degree of flexibility around what works best for you and the people playing the game. Again, they have difficulty scaling already. I'm just suggesting another option on the table. The enemy powers feels like a fun way to be attacked by the game. Having cards come out that will force you to discard things, force you to rearrange things, force you to take letters off the table, it's a fun little spin on the thing that makes it feel not just like a bunch of letters, not just like a letter game. There's a degree of having a villain, there's a degree of feeling attacked, there's a degree of trying to structure your words to not just be a word in its own right, but to be a word where you can take out a letter or two, where you can modify the word itself in order to sustain itself, in order to move on to the next round. And then having these challenges, these variety of books on the table, gives you that thing to strive for. It gives you that thing that you're going for, the book variety. Having stacks of these books with different options, different themes, different aspects to go for, having different ways you can accomplish it. Especially as you go through these blue books, you're going to have a lot of different options. You have a 5-letter word where you have only one type allowed, no wilds. Wow, you have to only, in this book over here, you'd have to have a 5-letter word that only has one color in it. You can have the blacks, but you can only have one color. You can't have, green and purple or whatever it is. You have over here 3 different books with, specifically with purple things. You have form a complete sentence, e.g., I am tired. That breaks a bit the rules around having smaller, 3-letter words or whatnot, but a bunch of fun options there as far as the book variety on the table. Lots of fun replayability and challenges as far as the game goes. I also find the game is well balanced in terms of the difficulty with the options to modulate as well based on the players how they do. Meaning I find the normal mode is a good challenge level. It's a good challenge where you can kind of win the game, but you do have to try, you do have to work together. I think normal does a good job of being an introductory game that feels challenging, and yet we've won our game so far. Versus moving up to hard starts really escalating into you have to be playing with people who know what they're doing. You have to be playing with people who have been playing Wordle the past 4 weeks. You have to be playing with people who are on their game. Legendary, I have not tried yet, and I'm scared to. I found hard to be a very difficult challenge as it was, and Legendary is just, well, more work. And again, the villains are piling up. The villains are getting harder as you go through the game, making it more likely that you will eventually have to start burning letters as those villains attack you, as they leave you stranded, as you keep moving into the next round and keep having to survive just one more round. The game can drag a bit as you move up those levels because the game's taking longer, but that's moving into things I don't like. But overall, this is a cooperative game with a good sense of escalation. The timer keeps things in check. The fact that it's cooperative stops it from falling into that, one player knows better than the rest that I tend to have a problem with in the genre. Overall, it's a fun system. As far as things I don't like, first of all, too many letters. I find that there's too many meh letters like the J's and X's and Z's that make it harder to make some of the larger words. Now the nice part is you do have that library in the middle, so you have ways of getting rid of them or not using them, although that will change as you go up the difficulty level. Trying to get rid of a J, a Z, and an X when you're playing on Legendary mode and only have room for one extra letter, you're really going to have to make sure you include those letters. And I find that many word games do have fewer of those letters that make your life a little easier. This might, I haven't gone through the word distribution, the letter distribution, but they show up more than I would think, more than I would want in terms of just, again, we have the X and the J over here. I don't know how many more we have in here. The nice part is they often are multicolor. Those black tiles over here count as any of the colors you need, so there is a little bit of flexibility that comes with it. But yeah, I find there's a bit more of those than I'd like. Additionally, I feel it needs a better system than simply waiting once players are done. Meaning, if I've accomplished my 2 books, let's say I'm playing on normal mode, if I've accomplished my 2 books and you haven't yet, I will keep building out words just to stay alive, and I can help you build out words, but I'm not really going with my own objective. I'm kind of just playing along, helping you, and it is cooperative, so it's not the worst, but it feels a bit aimless once one player has accomplished their books. I'd almost wish that there was some player power kind of option where once I'm done with my books, I have to grab a power, and that I don't have any strong ideas. I just have this idea that it feels a bit aimless when you are done with your books and other players aren't, and I kind of wish there was another direction the game could take to make you feel like you still have a goal or a reason to strive for something other than just helping your teammates. Helping your teammates is fine, but just worth mentioning. As far as that thing I touched upon already, that idea that there is still potentially a problem with the player who knows better than the others, this is a game where the dominant player kind of has to help to chip in. Meaning that one player at the game who's played Scrabble 14,000 times, who knows exactly how to cross that 8-letter word that gets a double score, triple score, whatever, that player is going to be better at this game than you. And especially when you're playing at normal or hard modes, you're going to have them helping chip in if you want to stay alive, if you want to work together and actually, well, not die, not have too many burned letters in the game. And so it does have a little bit of alpha player, which if you're playing on the right difficulties, if you're playing on easier difficulties, you might just have too easy a time to begin with. And if you're playing on hard difficulty levels, then the alpha player needs to kind of chip in. They need to be the alpha player and help you out with the game, which can be a bit frustrating depending on that gap, depending on whether it feels like they're helping you versus just playing the game for you. So it still is a bit victim to that just because of how well balanced the game is on difficulty. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, it's a word game. If you don't like word games, I can't imagine this changes your mind. Additionally, it has a real-time element. It has that timer, which I like the length of the timer. I find it's a good pacing in terms of the length of the rounds and how much room it gives you to do stuff, but I highly encourage you to get different timers if you don't like the amount of stress this timer will give you, or alternatively, this might not be a game for you. I don't know if it'll work as well without the timer. I don't even know how you would do that practically, so it does have a real-time element, which just is a factor. Additionally, some books I just find are not great in terms of the themes. You might get, this one over here, you might get sports terms. If you don't know sports, if you don't like sports, I mean, sure, you come up with bat and ball and whatever, but some terms are going to be more or less intuitive to one player. For us, we've been pretty simple on this one, which is when we get a term we don't like, we just go to the next one. Meaning it's not about hard or easy for us. We don't mind hard or easy, but if a term just isn't fun, then that's a whole different ballpark. So the reason it's not a problem for me is I don't mind, especially in a cooperative game, just drawing another book or letting another player draw a book. I do kind of wish the game gave some sort of allowance or credence for that yourself, but yeah, just do what you want ultimately. And additionally, speaking of doing what you want in cooperative games, we do tend to fudge things if it's down to the last few seconds. If we have like a second and a half left and we get the letters, we just call it a day and we're fine with that. We don't really care that much if we technically lost by a second and a half. We're more concerned with having a good time, and we don't mind, you know, adjusting for small details like that to ensure that we have a good time. As far as final thoughts and rating on Illiterati, this is a fun one, and I like word games as a concept. Like I said in the beginning, I already talked about, I like word games as a concept more than I tend to like them in practice because of those aspects, that dominant alpha player and the taking way too long to think of the perfect word. Now, in the past, I have had one word game that solved that problem for me, Paperback Adventures, which is not out yet. It's a solo word game, and because it's solo, you don't really have that issue of taking too long. If I'm taking too long, I'm fine with it. Who really cares? This one does so similarly in a different method because of the real-time element, because it forces you to really try to come up with words within the time frame, and it's cooperative. So between the two of them, I find it just doesn't really have that either of the problems I typically have with word games. It's a fun experience. You're working together. You're coming up with things. It feels like you really are working together. You sit there. You come up with your word. There is a degree. The same way there's a problem potentially with having a single stronger player, the game also is nice in the sense that if you're playing with kids or family, or not family, with kids or whoever that might be not as ideal at the game allows you to modulate that as they focus on getting their word done, and you take all their extra letters and you help whatever. So it's pros and cons to that element, but ultimately it feels like you're working together. It feels like you're being attacked by a bunch of villains. It feels like a nice sense of escalation as well as a nice sense of difficulty. Overall, this is one I'm really enjoying. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 for right now, with the caveat that word games in general, I always do find have, historically, I've liked them, and then sometimes they tend to go down, meaning they're a little bit victim to flash in the pan aspect because there's less going on. It's a word game. I like it. I am curious how well this one holds up over time. I am instinctively, I think this is one that will be around for a while. Instinctively, I feel like this is one of the fewer word games that will actually last in my collection because of what it's doing, but it does have that caveat. 4 for now, potentially could go down over time just by the nature of the genre it's in. Real-time and word games just historically have always been, you know, higher initially and then curving down for me. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, hardback and paperback, they're the most common word games in the hobby, I believe. Both those haven't worked as well for me because of this as I talked about, but Paperback Adventures does work for me, although it's not yet out. You may or may not be able to late pledge it, I don't know. And then Word on the Street. Word on the Street, which is actually not that greatly rated, but we really enjoy it, probably because of what I mentioned already. It has a timer, it has that real-time element, and it has worked well for us as a fun little party game with words and whatnot, that just going back and forth trying to come up with the perfect word to tug your letters across the street as needed. This is Illiterati, currently on Kickstarter. I'll have a link down below. Until next time, I am Alex Ratcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.